Always try to go back in the past to try to prove our point. So we'll take you back sometime. In the first place, I would like to bring back in memory is this nice building. It's not an Astana building, we already decided. This is a building in 2001 of Enron, one of the biggest companies in the United States at that moment, and we all know what happened to Enron. And because of globalization, this was not the only thing that happened with the frauds. Even in Holland, we suffered in our biggest companies, ABN Bank, Albert Heijn, we suffered from fraud and mismanagement. So what is normally the reaction of the government to this? They always jump in, they rescue financially. So even ABN Bank was completely Dutch government taken over, and they increase control. But it's never possible for the government to rescue all and to solve all problems. So also we see something changing in business. And after all the leadership styles we had, we now experienced a new leadership style, authentic leadership, which is clearly more to the basics, more to the sense of things. In business, we always say, think big, start small. But in this case, I would turn it around and I would say, start small, think big. Because, can you remember this? 2008, Freddie Mac and Fannie Mae. What came out of it? The downfall of two of the biggest United States companies. And what was the consequence? Banking crisis, going worldwide, in all the countries, banks falling down, recession. And what was the answer of the governments? Financial rescue, increase of control, but still they cannot solve all the problems. So again, think big, start small. Something happened in China. We are still not clear exactly what, but let's say it was something like this. And what happens? Globalization and corona crisis worldwide. So what is the answer to the situation? Everywhere, government jumps in, financial rescue. In Holland, we already spent 76 billion euros with only 17 million people living in Holland. And we spent 76 billion euros to save all the companies and to make sure people do not lose their jobs. And it works. Nobody lost their job. All companies survive. But of course, we got a lot of increase of control. But how long can we do this? How many crises can we survive? How often can we spend so much money on solving such a crisis? So, in my opinion, leadership shows us where it goes to. We now have, in the last, let's say, 8 years, shared leadership, open leadership, joint accountability, situational responsibility. What does it mean? In my opinion, multinationals are too big and even too important for society. If they fall down, we have to rescue them. They're not flexible enough. If there's a crisis, they have a real big problem. There's not enough innovation. They're only focusing on day-to-day stock value, and they're not flexible in times of crisis. So what is the answer of the business world? Everything is going to network organizations. Changing networks of autonomous companies working together on big projects, each time in different groups. Is this a strange development? I think it's necessary. We now have corona but there's so much more coming up. In Holland now, the aging is a huge, huge problem. Pollution everywhere, overpopulation, climate change, resources. And what about this? Can we control it? Is it possible to control the world, the crisis, economics, or even just one market? Is centralization the solution to this, or adaptation of smaller entities? We all once started like this. Families and tribes hunting together, making sure they get food together. Then we grouped villages, cities, and we made specializations, but always small firms. Then it got bigger, countries, industrial revolution, and now we even go to globalization and multinationals. So what's the next step? To my opinion, it was this. And in business, we went on to the industrial revolution and to the multinationals. But now it goes back and the circle goes more or less round. So to my opinion, it goes to a network of individuals. And a network is also meaning a lot of groups of individuals, each time different sizes, different groups. And this makes the circle round. And this means that all these crises can only lead to one thing: smaller units and the downfall of multinationals. And we already see in Holland now that the big companies are having the problems. The smaller companies are benefiting of the crisis. These were my words. Thank you very much.
My area of study is not so quickly a remedy for the current economic problems and post-COVID problems of the world and of the regions, because regional development takes some time. So I will briefly give you an insight about the regional development policies and continue with the Turkish examples and European Union examples. The regional development has gained importance after the Second World War in order to reconstruct the countries, especially in the Europe. And during this time, the academic research and professional experience has gained more importance on regional development policies starting from 1950s to 1980s. But with the 1980s, the neoliberalist approach to economy has sidelined the plan-based development approaches. But with this area, the free movement of goods, services, and capital has gained importance. We name this period as globalization, and it's still dominant all over the world. And for the last 20 years, the free movement of information also has been added to these three factors moving freely all over the world. Now, big data, automation, and smart systems has become dominant factors over the past decade. Now, the perception of development and perception of regional development needs to be reconsidered based on these new developments. And coronavirus problem has also showed us that the world is moving towards a more information technologies oriented economy and social life in the future. All possible services are being transferred into IT-based systems, online systems, automated systems all over the world. Even the factories, even the production plants are being transferred into less labor-dependent, more automated online systems. Now we are talking about Industry 4.0. And it is not possible for all the production systems, but it is possible for mass production. And also, after the coronavirus, we well know that the importance of logistics has gained more importance. Logistics and IT-based services are being dominated all over the world now. People now don't want to live in the big metropolitan, densely populated metropolitan areas. They want to move towards less densely suburban areas for health reasons. Instead of mostly densely urbanized populated areas, people are looking for a life in less urbanized areas. We can call it garden cities, a very well-known perception by the urban scientists. The business environment is also being transferred into more flexible and, if it's possible, home office style. On the one hand, we are witnessing a transfer from densely populated, densely urbanized areas towards less densely populated, less densely urbanized areas. On the other hand, in the post-coronavirus period, there is a need to restructure, there is a need to reconstruct the national economies and regional economies, which are badly affected by the economic problems during the coronavirus period. First of all, the supply chain has been disrupted all over the world, even in the countries, over the past few months. In order to overcome these problems, these kind of problems, there is a need to reconstruct, redesign the national economies and the supply chains, just like post-war area. But after the Second World War, it was based on construction business. It was based on more concrete infrastructures. Now it is need to be around more IT-based, information technologies oriented directions. And health sector also has showed its importance, and I'm sure within the following decades we will witness more research and business attempts on this area also. Regions in the national borders needs to adopt innovation-based, R&D-based development approach. In order to create this kind of research-based, innovation-oriented development, regions need to adopt learning infrastructures for the people living in the region and for the people living in the cities in their regions. Therefore, it will create a more habitable, a better environment, a better social and physical infrastructure for the people living in the region, which will attract more people to the region and more financial resources as well. And in order to reach this goal, a better habitable environment, a better habitable region, regions need to adopt and implement some new structures. But contrary to the regional development structures during the 1950s, 1960s, which are from top to bottom structures, management structures, today's regional development approach should be more participatory, from more network-based, more transparent, more accountable, more bottom-to-up structures. We call it more governance-oriented approaches. Of course, there will be still need for planning, for regional planning, which is always considered by, affiliated by the central government organizations. But we need to know where we are going. Regions need to have a plan, but it should be created more participatory processes. And this kind of organizations has started to emerge within the past few decades in Europe and in other regions of the world, and also in Turkey. May I share my slide?
Yes, please.
As I mentioned, regional development has to ensure growth and stability and balance the equalization problems in the region and between the regions in the country. And in order to reach these goals, regional development policies use some tools. First of all, and the most important one, I think, is the regional planning. The plans can be prepared for regional for the metropolitan areas, for rich resource regions, or for the poor regions. And public investments are other tools: public investments, public incentives, infrastructure investments, administrative creation of administrative organizations, financial and tax incentives and regulations, and promotion of other entrepreneurship activities are among the other policy tools used by the regional development policies. I would like to give you an example from the region, East Marmara region from Turkey. The region adopts three-pillar approach to reach its goals. In the center, it has to create a more competitive region through smart specialization, increasing value added for products and services produced in region, and facilitation of a business environment in the region. In order to create and promote this business environment, the region adopts a few approaches to improve the capabilities of the people living in the region, and to promote a better and more qualified labor force to the economy, and improve the social solidarity. And of course, more economically sustainable environment is inevitable for the region, and social cohesion and solidarity is also inevitable for the success of the plan. This is basically a classical sustainable development type of approach adopted and applied to the regional level. And European Union, as I mentioned earlier, has a kind of statistical system which is adopted adopted by Turkey. All of the European Union member states have this statistical regional system through which the European Union funds are channeled to the member states and candidate member states, and of course to the regions in the European Union area. Currently, there are 281 regions at the NUTS 2 level. There are 3 this is the second level I'm mentioning now. And financial resources, it's important for the European Union, the allocation of the funds to the regions in order to eliminate the imbalance problems both in the national boundaries and in the among the nations in the Union. As you can see, for the 7-year period, there are 350 billion euros allocated for the regional development and cohesion policy in the European Union. And Poland seems to be the highest beneficiary of these funds. European model adopts the coordination of state, market, and civil society, and it adopts and Turkey follows the example. Its example to create development agencies to use and facilitate regional development funds in the regions. The blue dots on the map shows many of the development agencies that uses this fund in the European Union, and some of the websites from Italy, from Greece. And this is the Turkey's regional development infrastructure. These are the institutions, agencies all over Turkey. Turkey has 26 regions based on European Union models. These regions are not administrative regions. These regions are statistically created regions to facilitate business and funding of the projects all over the Turkey. As an example, to improve the development projects and to strengthen the capacity of the region, many of the regions in Europe and Turkey also prepare regional innovation strategies for smart specialization. Smart specialization and innovation strategies are strongly supported by the European Union in order to create more competitive country, more competitive region, more competitive companies, both domestic and at the regional level and at the global level. Smart specialized strategic innovation, regional innovation ecosystem is being intended to create by these kind of strategies. And this is the East Marmara innovation ecosystem. Each of the actors that contribute to the competitiveness and innovation, more innovation-based economy in the region, from government agencies to universities to civil society and financial institutions and research and development institutions are all described, and industrial zones and technoparks also are taking place in this ecosystem. And clusters are the other important channels through which the regional economy develops and improves its innovative capacity. The region that I mentioned, East Marmara, has strongly been supporting clusters in this region. The first few of them are chemical cluster, machinery cluster, automotive, iron and steel, metal products, logistics, and electrical machinery products. The region this region is the most heavily industrialized region of Turkey. That's why these industries, all heavy industries, are accumulated in this region. Thank you very much. This is the example from Turkey, through which the country needs to intends to increase its competitiveness, intends to improve its regional learning infrastructure in order to create more habitable, in order to create a better social and learning environment. Thank you.
So here we can see the gross domestic product volume growth rate. and we can see this horrible decrease of the gross domestic product in Poland. This chart is pretty cool because and horrifying, of course, because we can see the consumption expenditures and the gross fixed capital formations and the gross domestic product, and we can see all of these factors are going down suddenly in 2020. So. The cultural institutions in Poland are mostly the public institutions. The private institutions, the cultural institutions, the few cultural institutions in Poland don't work at all nowadays. Probably it will be shut down totally. In Poland, in the past, we transformed the system of financing of culture, and most of those cultural public institutions have own revenues, so they have to work for the revenues, and the rest amount of news were subsidized. So to reduce the subsidies, we just the institutions were supposed to be more economical effective. And nowadays, most of these institutions can't be economical effective because they can't work properly. They are shut down. In a few months ago, the work of these institutions were limited, and nowadays it's shut down. Okay, let's see the map. Okay, here we have the map of Poland, and we can see here the structure of cultural institutions according to the scale of the decline in revenues from economic activity in the first and the second quarter of 2020. And what we can see, here we can see the regions, the deep blue color. We can see the regions where the decrease in revenues are at the level above 90%. So in most of these regions, a lot of institutions just lost the revenues, and actually the Polish government don't have any remedy for this situation, and probably we have to wait a little bit for the situation change. But what about the European Union? The European Union reinforced the EU countries to rebuild themselves from the after the pandemia, and the European economy used to be based on the creative factor. We should be considered as the creative economy, and a lot of countries in Europe make a huge efforts to achieve the status of the creative economies, and spend a lot of public money to be considered as a creative economy. And here we have the three segments of the European Union budget, and the second one is the new component, the Next Generation EU, which should be the main source of the money in European Union after the COVID. And here we have three three branches of the European Union policy. First one is supporting member states to recover. Second is the kick-starting the economy and helping private investment, and learning the lessons from the crisis. And what is the role of the cultural institutions in all of this anti-COVID policy of European Union? In Poland, we do a lot to digitalize the culture. So some of cultural institutions have a great experience in the new situations, the digital situations. We have digital theaters, digital access to the museums and archives, but it is not enough. And the interesting role of the European Union will be the kick-starting the economy and helping private investment. And they will support key sectors and technologies and investing in key value change, and also transist the role of the economy, transist the form of the economy and the industry to be more digitalized. So probably to improve the private investment, to help to support the investment, the culture should play one of the main role, because the cultural institutions have impact of the regional attractiveness for the investments, especially the foreign investments. But nowadays, and in the most of the European countries, the cultural institutions are in big troubles. So also the European Union have a new, more flexible emergency tools. Actually, they are not new, but the European policy make it more flexible. It's a Solidarity and Emergency Aid Reserve and Solidarity Fund, and also European Globalization Adjustment Fund. And I hope the money that we received from the European Union, all the European Union countries will receive soon, will help us to rebuild the common world, the European world after the pandemic. Thanks for your attention.
I'm sitting on the west coast of the United States right now in the state of Washington, near Seattle. As the world knows, my country is going through, in addition to being the hardest hit by the pandemic, we've been the least successful, I think, at combating the pandemic. We also have proven ourselves to be anything but a true democracy. I hate to say that, but that's the case. And as I spoke at the Kazakhstan Economic Summit and St. Petersburg Economic Summit a couple of years ago, I really came to understand how most of the world doesn't necessarily want to have a democracy. Most of the world hasn't had many democracies or any. And in the United States, we're brought up to believe that everybody wants democracy. I think that what we've seen in recent times, that if the United States is an example of democracy, who would want one? Because we're dysfunctional at this point. We've shown that. And we've also shown that although we may be the largest economy in the world, we have done this by creating what many economists today are referring to as a death economy. And that's an economic system that in essence is consuming itself into extinction. It's based on a single premise, and that is that the goal of business is to maximize short-term profits regardless of the environmental and social costs. That's a very lousy goal. And when you look at human beings throughout most of our 250,000 years of history, we've not had that goal for most of that time. The goal has always been to help future generations, to leave our children and grandchildren a world as good as or better than the one we inherited. But in recent times, this death economy has set itself as a goal of short-term profits. It's not even the quarterly corporate report anymore. It's the daily stock market here in the United States. That's all we care about. And it's about doing whatever it takes to create that situation. It's about destroying competition or buying out competition, creating these huge corporations that have so much power. And this is really a situation that's creating all the problems that we have today in the world. The global crisis, climate crisis. We know the glaciers are melting. We know the oceans are rising. We know we've got a climate crisis. We know we've got terrible income inequality crises. We know we've got great poverty around the world. And the pandemic, all of these things are directly or somewhat indirectly related to this idea of short-term profit growth. And this is an idea that was developing over several hundreds of years, actually, but it really took off in 1976 when Milton Friedman won the Nobel Prize in Economics. And although it had been developing, and von Heineken, who won the Nobel Prize a couple of years earlier, had proposed something similar, Friedman was extremely powerful in the world of economics. He had the ear of President Reagan and Thatcher and many people around the world, Poland, he was at many, many different places. And his most important statement was probably that the only responsibility of business is to maximize short-term shareholder profits, regardless of the social and environmental costs. It's a terrible goal, and we have to change it. So I think we need to look at what does a life economy look like? Well, the life economy starts with the premise, the goal, that the goal of business and everyone else is to maximize long-term benefits for people in the world. And it's an economic system that pays people, that hires people and pays investors to invest in things that clean up pollution, that mine all the plastic that's out in the oceans today, and so on and so forth, that regenerate destroyed environments, that recycle, that create new technologies. Many of the things we've heard about this morning, the whole internet age, the age of high technology, that can be truly a part of the life economy. I think we've been moving into that life economy. Before the pandemic, we were moving there. Here in the United States, and I think much of the world, we're looking at ideas like green GDP, not just GDP, but green GDP, B corporations, benefit corporations, conscious capitalism. These are things that were evolving. And the pandemic has shown us that we must move in this direction. You know, in the past, we've been affected by crises, hurricanes and tidal waves and fires and so on, but people looked at these as local. If I survived a serious hurricane, I expected the outside world to come to my help eventually, maybe in a few days, maybe a few weeks, bring me water, food. But the pandemic is that's not going to happen. There's no outside world. The pandemic has hit every living creature on this planet, every one of them. And so it sent us this very strong message that we must change. We must move from this economic system that's based on short-term profit maximization, short-term materialistic consumption, to one that's based on long-term. And I'd like to comment on a couple of things. So we've heard in some of these talks about the need for growth. Well, we have to define what growth is. If what we're talking about is growth in more stuff, more materialistic things that are just ravaging the earth and don't really serve a purpose, we can't afford that anymore. If we're talking about growth in cleaning up the environment and creating technologies and businesses that do mine the plastic in the oceans and all the oil that's leaked around gas stations around the world and oil drilling sites, And if we're talking about growth in businesses that regenerate destroyed environments, that replant trees where forests have been destroyed, that fill in old mines and move us away from digging up the earth and ravaging it, that's the kind of growth we need. We need growth in the arts. We need growth in spirituality. And I'm not talking about religion. I'm talking about going deep within ourselves, which is another modern movement. And that's been growing, at least in my country, through this pandemic, where people are really doing a lot more meditation, and they're doing it by the internet and so forth. There's a lot of areas for growth, but what we don't need is growth in the old methods, the old systems, which ravage the earth, which destroy the future for my grandson and every child on this planet. So we need to move in that direction. And, you know, I'd like to say a word about GDP. We hear a lot of this today, and it was my job as chief economist was to grow GDP in the countries that I was advising. But I came to understand that GDP is a very, very poor measure of prosperity. It only measures the prosperity of the rich people. It does not measure overall prosperity like I was taught to believe it did in business school, and like the World Bank wants us to believe. So here's an example. In the United States, 3 individuals have as much wealth as half the United States population. You can do a back of the envelope calculation. If those 3 individuals made 10% return on their assets last year, and half the United States lost 3%, we'd show a GDP growth of something around 3.5%. We'd show a growth in GDP, even though half the country was doing worse. And so we need to develop new forms of measurement, ones that take into account the long term, our own sustainability. And, you know, I think the message of the coronavirus, this pandemic, should be that we can move into these new technologies. We can change. We've made huge changes in the past, during the past months during this pandemic. We've made, I mean, the seminar we're having now, I'm not in Kazakhstan. I'm not in Russia. None of us, I don't think any of us are sitting in the same room together. We're coming from Turkey and Poland and the United States and Kazakhstan and all over it. It's magnificent. You know, will we ever go back to the old ways? Well, I hope once in a while we will get to meet each other personally. But we've come to understand that that's not necessary, and it's often very inefficient. We have seen that there'll be whole new sectors of the economy developing, as we heard on an earlier talk this morning here. And so we've seen that we can move, we can change radically. So let's really change now. Let's commit to moving into a new economic system that's very exciting, that provides full employment for people, but full employment for people doing things that make a better long-term future. And I'd also like to comment on something else that I see happening, and that is that the West, and especially the United States, is absolutely in decline. There's no question about it. And the East is on the rise. China is leading the New Silk Road. I traveled around a lot of the countries in the last few years that are part of the New Silk Road. And also to Latin America. I spent a lot of time in Latin America. I'm headed there in a couple of months, if the virus doesn't pick up too much. And the Belt and Road Initiative, the road part of that is reaching across the seas. It's in Latin America. China, in every way, is beating out the United States and Latin America. The Latin Americans have seen that they've been exploited by the United States, people like the economic hitman. And China has a policy of not interfering with politics. Now that may just be wordsmithing, I don't know. But what I do know, I don't know what the sincerity, but what I do know is that there's a radical shift in the balance of power on our planet. And I think we need to recognize that. And I think you who are involved in shaping economic policy must really try very hard to understand that this shift in power is going on. And at the same time, we must encourage the countries that are on the rise to move into a life economy. One of the reasons that the United States is on the decline is because it's been so dedicated to maximizing short-term profits, to Wall Street, to making huge profits for a very small number of people, really. And that's proven to be a big mistake. So as we move forward, and as the balance of economic power shifts from one country to another, from one region to another, let's really focus on making sure that we create an economic system that's very different from the one that we've been living under during all of my lifetime. I was born at the end of World War II. I've seen a death economy. I've seen the benefits of it, and had created tremendous benefits for many years. You know, the technology that we have today, we wouldn't have without that death economy. It's created amazing advances in medicine and the sciences and the arts and technology and all kinds of technology, but it's reached its limit. Everything has limits, and we've reached the limit. I would just end with one other thought here, and that is that back in 1914, Henry Ford said, if I ask the people what they want, they would say faster horses. But Ford said, I know the world doesn't need faster horses. The world is dying from horse pollution. And the fact of the matter was, all the big cities of the world were smothering under horse manure. They were filled with horse manure. And all the fields, all the lands around major cities were devoted to feeding horses. And so Ford said, the solution to pollution is the automobile. And he was right. It was for a long time, but it isn't anymore. And I think that, you know, the lesson there is that we need to be flexible. The great minds that are on this program together today, and all of you, the networks each one of you has, which is also filled with great minds, we need to come together and understand that we mustn't try to go back to the old normal, the death economy. It's time now to move forward with great strength, with great creativity, with great inspiration and dedication to a new type of economy, a life economy. And this is an economic system that our children and our grandchildren will thank us for. They'll look back at this time and say, thank heaven those people came together back in 2020 and opened their eyes and got 2020 vision and saw that the course they were on was a self-destructive course, and they committed to moving forward into a new course. I think this is such a very, very exciting time to be alive. I think this is such an exciting time to be in the position that everybody on this program is in. We're all in different positions, but every one of us has the ability to influence economic policy and the world, the way the world moves. And so I think we should all feel very, very blessed to be at this time and be take a great deal of responsibility and be totally committed to moving forward into a new type of economic growth and development. Thank you very much. I really appreciate being on this show. It's a great group of people. Thank you.
My name is Madina. I work at Economic Research Institute. Firstly, I would like to thank you all speakers for today's discussions. It is a great honor for me to participate in this conference. And yes, I absolutely agree with my colleagues, with Dr. Dolores, that globalization has pros and cons. And it is known that globalization has been one of the most hotly debated topics in international economics over the past few years. And on the one hand, it facilitates rapid growth and poverty reduction. And examples for that are China, India, and other emerging countries. And on the other hand, globalization tends to increase inequality and environmental degradation. And in this context, I have a question perhaps to Mr. Perkins, for you. How do you think how less developed countries could achieve competitive advantage when the injustice global competition for educated talent has distorted the local market? And the second one question, yeah, yes, please.
Okay, well, Medina, I mean, that's a very, very important question. And I ask it often myself, and I don't think there's any general response to that. I think there are individual responses. So if I look at my own hemisphere here, in the Caribbean, we have the country of Aruba, which has done an amazing job at creating potable water out of seawater. I mean, they've developed incredible technologies. And they've also working on technologies for storing energy. So one of the things that they have is that they will pump air when energy is cheap. They use a lot of solar and a lot of wind. So during the day, when you have solar and wind, they pump air into this huge, it's like a big flexible metal balloon that's under the ocean. And when there's no sun or no wind, the pressure of the ocean, they open a valve, and the pressure of the ocean pushes the air up, and it goes through turbines and creates electricity. I mean, so there's a country that's developing amazing technologies in water creation from salt water, and also how to store energy. Costa Rica has done an amazing job at protecting its environment. Very different. So all different countries have different ways of moving forward. And in this era of high technology, there's so many opportunities for various countries to play some role in that. And I think one of the advantages of, if we looked at the good side of globalization, and I talk about the idea of the New Silk Road, which I would like to think of as not as a Chinese initiative, but as a potential for all of us to come together and help each country work to its greatest competitive advantage. And some countries may not have much of a competitive advantage. And then I would say it behooves all of us to help those countries take care of their people. I've spent a lot of time in indigenous communities in the Amazon and elsewhere. And one of the important aspects of those communities is that if anybody is suffering needlessly, everyone suffers. So they mean if anybody's suffering from lack of food or shelter or love, everyone's suffering. Some people will suffer because they have a disease that nobody can cure, that can't be helped. But that you take care of those who can't take care of themselves. And that may be the case with some countries. So I think this idea of globalization, and I'm not talking about one world where we all have the same culture or languages. I don't like that at all. I think it's very, very important that we each have develop our own cultures and our own languages and our regional approach, like we heard earlier this morning in Turkey. But at the same time, how do we all come together to let each country develop its best competitive advantages and use those in a positive way without some other country trying to exploit it, which unfortunately is an economic hitman. That's what I did. I went to countries that had things that my country wanted, and we took them one way or another through debt, sometimes through military force. So we need to move out of that, but we need to help these countries develop and recognize that there are going to be some places and some peoples that don't have much of a competitive advantage. And so it behooves the world to take care of those people, just as we would if we were living in a tribal community in the middle of the Amazon. Because the fact of the matter is, this pandemic has taught us that we are one tribe. It doesn't matter what nationality we are, what culture, what color our skin is. None of that matters anymore. The virus doesn't give a damn. It just doesn't care. It's an amazing lesson that we hopefully we are learning. We are still in the process of learning it. So again, I would say it's hard to generalize, but we need to look at each country individually.
Thank you very much, Mr. Perkins. And my second question is, in your speech, you mentioned that GDP is not, it's a poor measure of the welfare of economy. Maybe you could give an example or alternative measure to GDP. What do you think it is the best measure to the prosperity of the country?
Yes, I think we really need to work on how we develop that, and that's not my field of expertise. But I think the idea of the triple bottom line, bringing that in, it shouldn't just be about profits. It shouldn't just be about maximizing profits. And GDP is really about maximizing the wealth of the very wealthy. That's what we measure. So we need to take into account social and environmental issues. And I think the whole idea of this idea of a happiness index, and that's
yes, exactly. I was thinking about that too.
Yeah, we need to bring, when we recognize that economics is all about people. It's not really a science at all. It's more of a sociological aspect. It's about people are the economy. And that's an aspect that we haven't brought into the measurements. The measurements have been have tried to quantify things in terms of money. We need to look at how do we qualify things and quantify them in terms of people and people's happiness. And I think that's a very, very important one. I'm glad to see that you're looking at it. But I hope in your institution, you really dive deep into that, because man, we need people to come along and come up with some brilliant ideas that the world will accept. And that's going to be one of the biggest problems is how do we get these traditionalists to accept these things? And the pandemic ought to give us some leverage in making that happen, because what we've seen is that our current system has failed us and we need to create something new.
Yeah,
Thank
you very much. Thank you very much.